Hello, Internet, and welcome back to another episode of the Savara podcast. I am your host, Bizarre, and today I have brought with me two special guests on my right, or to your right. I don't know which angle you're looking at this from. We have Vildred, and on to my left we have Purgus. Today, we are going to be discussing originality and what it means to truly be original, why be original, and is there any purpose in being original? So, my fellow guests, who would like to introduce themselves first? I'll go first. My name is Purgus, and really I have nothing interesting going on in my life. I really am honored to be here, sitting down next to the merchant leader himself, the leader of the bizarre merchant trade guild. I have nothing else to say. You can introduce yourself, Vildred. I'm sorry for taking time. You know, for a furry, I tolerate you. My name is Vildred. I would have ended the world had Ross not stood in my way. But you know what? I'm alive anyways, so who cares? Woohoo, let's proceed. You know, I want to know. What do you mean you would have ended the world? Was I assisting you with that? Yeah, I'm gonna need to stop you two right there. You know, I owe this to my viewers. Yes, I did invite Vildred, who would have destroyed the very world, killed our goddess, blah blah blah. And here I have Purgus, who helped with that. You might be wondering, why let two criminals on screen? Well, it's really simple. I really do think people deserve a chance, and as a ex-therapist, I would like to hear their thoughts on what it means to be original, since Vildred wanted to destroy the world because it was a never-ending repeating cycle, and I really want to hear his thoughts on this topic. You, Purgus, you're only here because, frankly speaking, we needed to meet some diversity quotas. You're black and you're a furry. You meet all the qualifications for diversity. Now, let's proceed. Hear that, Purgus? You've been reduced to your race and color. You know, if I squint my eyes, Bizarre is kind of already a furry, and he's kind of black if I really squint my eyes. I mean, if I really squint them. So, yeah, I'm willing to take the joke from him since he's such a reputable man. He would never be racist. That's just impossible. Why the sudden silence? Are you two trying to say something? You know, forgive me for trying to invite two guests that just deserve a second chance. Let's start talking about originality. You know, I'll impose the question. What does it mean to be original? Come on, Vildred. Surely you have something interesting to say. There are two ideas of originality that we can dive into. The first form of originality is originality in ideas. You're the first to come up with an idea that no one else has come up with. Now, to be a original person, you have to separate the ideas because a person is already unique. They are already original. They are born in their own time with their own name, own race, blah, blah, blah. Even if two extremes, you know, two people born in the same place, around the same time, same name, maybe even same family, they will still come out differently. It is very impossible to simulate two of the same exact lives. Even in our world where, you know, we get reborn and revived the very same way, our worlds are a little different. So even in that aspect, are we original from ourselves? Are we original from the heart? Is the soul the same? What's the deal with originality? In fact, there is no point in distinguishing originality because nothing is original. And pondering the idea of originality in of itself is not original. Well, if that is the case, then why even ponder the meaning of originality in the first place? Don't ask me. I've already subscribed to the belief that nothing in this world is original, and I don't even try to pretend that I am original in this thought. Well, my answer might vary a little bit from yours, Vildred, but I'm gonna use your example where everyone is born different, and even if there are similarities, even if they are pushed to the extreme, two of the same person cannot exist, at least not under the same exact circumstances. In fact, even if they had the same exact name, circumstances, surroundings, the time may be different, for example, or the soul may be different. There are inherent differences in people, and if those differences don't make us original, well, that's why we try to be original, because we're trying to make ourselves more interesting than the circumstances around us. We're trying to be different. Now, why be different? Why be interesting? The closest meaning I can find is purpose. Some people live their lives looking at others thinking, what makes me different from this person? And another looks at another person and is like, hey, this person is actually very normal. Why can't I be like that guy? Well, that's the thing. We're original, we're unique, we're different, and that gives us a sense of purpose. We want to be different from other people. We all heard of that one bundle of energy spreading positivity to everyone around him. Would you rather a positive person just be negative because we're all born negative? That's just, I don't know, it sounds like a flaw to me. It's just, even if you subscribe to the belief that nothing is original, you should still be original in a positive way. Another reason to try to be original, unique, or different is self-satisfaction, because really, you might be looking around yourself. Say you're the only positive person among a group of negative people. You're just dissatisfied that negativity is the normal, the original things. I mean, the, common factor between them. So you being positive, that gives you self-satisfaction because you're dissatisfied with others, therefore you want to satisfy yourself. And of course, some people are attracted to positive people, so another person could just put a fake personality for attention. It does happen. I'm not pretending that everyone is a saint, but yeah, there are many reasons to be original in that case. Even if the circumstances around you, they're unique, but those aren't the factors that make you original. I don't know, I think I've over-explained my point. What do you guys think? Two very in-depth answers. I really am satisfied with what you two have brought in to the table. Now, if you ask for my input, I would say it is a pendulum effect. In one generation, let's say 10 people are born negative, pessimistic, and all that stuff, and one person is born positive. Now, this one positive person can spread positivity to the negative people, and those people become positive and optimistic. And that's the thing. When does original stop being original? Now, everyone is positive. Now, everyone is an optimistic. Now, everyone loves their life. And then, all it takes is one person to become negative again. Suddenly that negative person is the original person. But if we don't want to call that person original because, we all started negative and then we became positive, does that add a time frame? Is there a time frame where something is original but then doesn't become original as time passes? Does something start as unoriginal and then become original? In fact, parodies, for example, do just that. They pick already overused cliches that are deemed non-original and they add an original spin to it. In fact, these very same cliches were at some point original. I don't know, I would like to hear your thoughts on this. In order to figure out whether an argument is sound or not, I think we should push things to the very extreme. Entertain me here. What if this podcast in of itself is actually a parody? We are already established characters. Really, what makes you Bizarre as Bizarre? What makes me Vildred as Vildred? And what makes Purgus as Purgus? What stops me from just calling another person and saying, yep, you're Bizarre? Or on the opposite end, what stops me from changing your name Bizarre? What if I started calling you Beshar? It's just your name doesn't change anything about you, the person. But in another sense, a parody could be made with you having that name. And we, as the viewers, or we as people observing you, we'd be like, yep, Bizarre and Beshar are different people. Does that make sense to you? It does make sense to me. In fact, You could just replace me by any person. In fact, you could just bring Eufine on the podcast, and if she says the same exact words with the same exact tone that I'm saying things, really, what differentiates me from Eufine? Sure, we may be similar in that aspect, but using your language, the parody language, we're all parodies of the same characters, or, character, not to make multiple characters, of course. And that's what I'm saying. One of us is always going to be the devil's advocate. One of us is always going to be the guy who tries to smoothen things out. And there will always be the one who is trying to get very hyper analytical. And yeah, as I said, to know if an argument is sound, push it to the very extremes. This podcast, even though there is no other Bazaar in this world making a Savara podcast, what makes this podcast original? In fact, our very conversation isn't original. I'm repeating my same point. I don't think anything is original in this point or in this world. And I don't know, you would have to convince me more, because the pendulum argument, I argue that it all started as original. We as people just think we are original, which, again, I will state this multiple times. If you replace me by another person, how would people know the difference? Or if I called you Bashar instead of Bazaar, people would have a mental image, hey, this Bazaar guy, cool and all, but then there's also this Bashar guy who looks like Bazaar, acts like Bazaar, and is Bazaar. You see what I'm trying to say? I hope that makes sense, because honestly speaking, this is why I want to destroy the world. You, Bazaar, have lived 7 different lives. I've lived 7 different lives. Purgus has lived 7 different lives. How are we all the same person with the same name? It doesn't make sense to me. Since we're using parodies as an example, I guess the same thing applies to writing and research. A research that was published 1,000 years ago doesn't go into depth. It just breaches a philosophy or an idea that we want to discover. But because no one else discovered it at the time, we call that person a pioneer, even though given enough time, someone else would have done that first research. And in the case of stories started very normal. They convey a message, maybe they have a moral, maybe they don't convey a message. Maybe they were just written text that we call a story. And then over time, stories started to develop a moral. And then over time, they started to develop cliches. And then over time, they started to develop, different subcategories like action adventure or fantasy adventure, romance adventure, and then there's romance school. We all know how school romance stories follow the same exact characters with the same exact plot points, with the same exact events repeating all over again. But really, in this recent anime thing, one guy got rejected and then he prayed to his god, and then his god was like, hey, yo, my bad, G. And then suddenly he was given this blessing where 100 girls will fall in love with him because they just saw him on first sight. And because they saw him on first sight and fell in love with him, if they do not go out with him, they are cursed. See, they're trying to add a original spin on an already non-original idea. In which case, give 100 years, these same original spins stop being original. Look at Konosuba, for example. It makes fun of the isekai genre, which we all know the isekai genre is the same thing all over again. It's just junk food delivered differently. What's the difference between McDonald's and KFC presenting you shit food at the end of the day? And yes, I am slandering KFC even though I am black. I mean, the person saying this, the person borrowing my voice, could not be black. In fact, the soul in me may not even be a furry. So I guess maybe you've convinced me, Vildred. Nothing is original. And that's time. Unfortunately, we don't have much time on the Savara podcast because really, I don't think television accepts 2 terrorists on screen. But I'll give you 2 my final thoughts and opinions because you 2 were so earnest and open to each other in this conversation. My thoughts is actually the answer is hiding in plain sight. It's so easy to be original that obsessing over originality doesn't make you original. So in fact, not obsessing on originality and just doing your thing, as long as you're enjoying your time, that in of itself is original. Maybe I'm the optimist surrounded by negative people, or maybe I'm actually the negative person because I don't want to think hard into this. I want to stay with the same way things have been 100 years ago. In fact, 1,000 years ago, social media wasn't a thing. So the amount of people you meet is very little, but now you can meet 1,000,000 people if you want within a day if you really, really tried. And yeah, I would argue that because it is so easy to be caught up in this web of originality, that in of itself is original. Because really, the only way you can disprove whether this is original or not original is if another dimension featuring all of us happens. And if the world resets, you know what? Let the world reset. At least there aren't 2 or 5 separate worlds going all at once, where your soul is living multiple lives. But that, I guess, goes back to Plato's philosophy. Plato argues, or was it Plato? I forgot who's the philosopher. But the philosopher argues that we are already born with memories and knowledge, and we, as we live our lives, are retaining those memories, or we're recalling those memories. So when a concept is introduced to us, we recollect that information. In my opinion, that philosophy is flawed, but that's time. What are your thoughts on this? I would like to hear that. In fact, the only reason I'm arguing originality is because I really hope the Bizarre podcast is original, because, frankly speaking, if the Bizarre podcast isn't interesting, why would people care? If the Bizarre podcast isn't original, why would people care? Anyways, Vildred, Pergus, thank you for your time. I, Bizarre, sign out.